Okay, perfect. All right, well, welcome everybody. Happy Friday. Today I'm going to be providing you with wild and obscure nature's hidden gems. And as per usual, I try to be a little bit vague with my titles because I don't necessarily want you to come in knowing exactly what to expect. So I appreciate you being here despite some maybe confusion about what you're here to see. So what we're going to talk about today are animals all over the globe that we may not know about, may not have seen. They're going to be of varying rarity. They're going to be of all types of different species and animals. So we're going to talk about insects and birds. So just going to take you through kind of the hidden gems of animals around the world. So we will start. This is called a jerboa. So the jerboas live in the deserts of North Africa and into Asia. As you can see, they have these long hind legs, almost like a kangaroo, and then these massive ears, these big eyes. So they look almost like a mouse and a kangaroo combined. So they can jump up to 10 feet. So, I mean, that's a large distance for such a small animal. Yep, that's a long jump for a small little mouse. They have these big ears to be able to not only dissipate heat in their desert environment, but also to be able to hear very, very well. So they can hear insects, they can hear predators. They're most active at twilight when the desert sun has gone down. And they are obligate bipeds, meaning that they don't use those small forelimbs, these front arms, they don't use those to walk. They hop around on these back legs. Although they are a little bit different to a kangaroo, they don't hop as you would imagine a kangaroo would. They kind of skip around. They jump very erratically. So if you ever were to see a jerboa in the wild, they'd kind of be skipping around, hopping all over the place. And if you scared them well enough, they'd jump way away from you. So that's our first animal. Jerboas are, I'm going to provide the conservation classification for each of these animals. Jerboas right now are of least concern. There are some species that are endangered, but as of right now, the main jerboa species are of least concern, meaning that scientists have very little concern about their current population dynamics. Okay. Welcome, welcome. Okay, I'll take a little pause. Pause. Okay. Next animal on the list is the coelacanth. Has anybody here heard of the coelacanth before? Okay, yeah, I've got a couple hands. This is a very, very interesting fish because for a long time, the coelacanth was originally known as a fossil. Many scientists up until the mid 1900s, they were thought to be extinct. So this species was examined as a very, very ancient type of lobed fin fish. And then in 1938, near South Africa, a living specimen was found. And it was a huge revelation. It was incredibly exciting for these scientists because they had thought that this species had been extinct for a couple 100 million years. So yeah, it would be the equivalent of, you know, going into the rainforests of Africa and finding a T-Rex. I mean, it was just so, you know, unthought of. So it was incredibly interesting for the scientists to find a living specimen of this species. And then they found other specimens. So there's some in South Africa, there's some in the Indian Ocean. So there's multiple species still alive today, or extant, as we would say. So extinct meaning that there are no longer living specimens, and extant meaning that they are currently living. And fossils of this group of fish have been found to be as old as 410 million years old. So that is an incredibly ancient species, not only to find fossils of, but also to find living specimens. Now, the sad thing for the coelacanth is they are critically endangered. So we originally thought them to be extinct. We found them alive, and now they're back on their way to extinction. So sometimes that's the hard part, especially with a lot of these creatures that we don't know a lot about or haven't heard much about before. A lot of these species do fall into that endangered, threatened, or critically endangered area on the conservation list. Pretty cool. Yeah, Terry.
How long are they?
Yeah, it depends on the species. So you can see here, this animal right here is probably a couple feet long, so probably 3 to 4 feet long. Some of these reef type species, you know, the ones that live in like the Indian Ocean near coral reefs, those are probably closer to 1 to 2 feet, maybe a little smaller, but they are pretty large fish, all things considered. Okay. Has anybody heard of the Saula before? That's one I was hoping to stump everybody with. Some of these I understand if you've heard before, but some of them I'm trying to get you something new. So this reclusive forest-dwelling animal lives between Vietnam and Laos. It's actually a relative of bovines, so it's most closely related to things like cows. It's obviously very deer-like. It doesn't look very much like a cow, but it is so specialized that it really doesn't fall exactly into any family or species that we imagine. So it's closely related to cows, but as you can see, it differs in a lot of its body shape and the way it's designed. So only scientifically described in 1993. So that's very late. Most, especially large animals like the Saula, whether herbivore or carnivore, they get described pretty soon. You know, humans have explored vast expanses of this world, even areas that are very difficult to reach. So for an animal of this size to go undiscovered until 1993 is exceptionally rare. This animal, the Saula, is also known as, I think it's the Vietnamese unicorn, because A, it is so rare, and B, it's kind of got the horns. It looks a little bit like a unicorn, but it is also critically endangered. It's only been sighted after its discovery a couple times through trail cams and through occasional expeditions into the park where it lives. But there are few specimens, although you know it's hard to determine with how rarely this species is seen. Yeah, it does a little bit. It has some of those traits that would make you to believe.
So it's pretty large.
It is pretty large. Yeah, it's probably about the size of a deer, a larger deer. So if you think about like a white-tailed deer, about that size. Yeah, pretty large. What's that? Yes, they are protected. They live in a protected national park between Vietnam and Laos. They live in a kind of forested mountainous area. So they are protected within their range. They aren't hunted. But with most of these animals, if we see them on this endangered list in a conservation status, so least concern means that scientists have no concern about their future population dynamics. Anything below that means that there are significant concerns. So despite living in this park, you know, they still only have so much acreage with which to, you know, expand their population. So for that reason, they are critically endangered. Okay. The binturong. Anybody heard of the binturong before? Okay, a couple hands. Yeah, this is also known as the bear cat. Its home is in Southeast Asia. And if you haven't heard of this animal before, this is maybe one of the most fun facts you can ever share with somebody. This animal is famous for smelling like buttered popcorn. And I've never had the ability to smell it myself, but it's a pretty typical takeaway when you see this animal is they smell like buttery popcorn, which is interesting. Not a lot of animals, when they smell good. It's also one of the few carnivorous mammals to have a prehensile tail. So a tail that can grip, a tail that can move. Most tails kind of just can wave, but they can't grip onto things. So one of the few carnivorous mammals that has a tail that can allow it to hold on to things. The binturong is vulnerable. Vulnerable means that its population is in decline. For the binturong, its population is declining due to habitat loss, human intrusion into its habitat. And that's pretty common for a lot of animals. Nowadays, we as humans are looking for more and more space with which to do our activities. And oftentimes that means that we're taking habitat away from animals like this. A little. Yeah, I mean, they eat insects, other amphibians, birds, so they are carnivorous. But yeah, they do hang out in groups, and they probably do spend a lot of their days sleeping or resting. All right. Yep. I don't like spiders either, so I understand. But these spiders are tiny, tiny, tiny. If there was a peacock spider on my hand, it would fit right here on the base of my thumb. I could hold it right there. So even if you're scared of spiders, this one is so small that I don't think it would really scare you. These spiders largely are of least concern. Their population is steady. There are a couple different variations of these spiders in different localities that are endangered or threatened, but most are of least concern. Peacock spiders are a genus of jumping spider. So we have jumping spiders here in the United States and in Colorado. So you may have seen another species of jumping spider before. But these spiders specifically are known for their ornate colorations, which, if you can see those pictures, are beautiful. I mean, just unbelievable colorations that you won't often see in the natural world. And then not only do they have that ornate coloration, they have very complex mating dances. So they'll put up those hind legs and they'll shake their legs and they'll shake that abdomen around, and they'll dance almost like peacocks to attract their mate. It's a very interesting thing to see. All right. Okay. The rainbow milkweed locust. So again, I understand if we aren't the biggest fan of bugs, but the reason I put this one on here is it's just amazing colorations. You have those blues and greens and yellows and reds. Again, it's not so often that you see coloration like that in the wild, but these locusts, they derive their toxic, so they are toxic. They derive that toxicity from consuming milkweed and other toxic plants. And then their coloration is to tell predators, hey, I'm toxic. If you eat me, you're going to get sick. And so the predator knows, oh, that's a really bright looking insect. I'm going to leave it alone. The locusts are defensive. So they have that innate toxicity, but they also are pretty defensive as far as insects go. And they are large, measuring up to 4 inches long. So again, if you don't like bugs, you may want to stay away from this very large locust. If you had it on your hand, it would take up most of your palm length. Yeah, very beautiful. A good creature to look at and not to get too close to. All right. Yeah, so this lizard is called a sailfin dragon. That's pretty interesting. I hadn't heard of this species before. So 4 out of the 5 species of sailfin dragon live in Indonesia. I think the other one lives in the Philippines, if I recall correctly. And these moderately large lizards live near water and utilize that special tail fin to help propel themselves through the water. So despite their name and what you may imagine, these lizards are largely herbivorous. So they might eat, some insects or things like that, but more than anything, they are plant eaters. These creatures are also vulnerable. They need marshy habitat near water. And so when humans are looking for fishing areas or other locations to develop, sometimes they encroach on the territories of creatures like this. Alrighty. Yeti crabs. Anybody heard of a Yeti crab before? Okay, another new one. So yeah, Yeti crabs are another species. Now, it's a lot more common for oceanic species to be discovered recently because there's just so much unexplored area. It's so difficult to get to, difficult to study. So Yeti crabs were just discovered in 2005. It has a white coloration and a furry appearance that really are unlike almost anything else. They live very, very deep in the ocean, oftentimes near hydrothermal vents. They don't have a conservation status because they are so rare and newly discovered that scientists actually can't make assumptions about its population status. So they're pretty cool, though. Fun to look at. I think in the Atlantic, but as far as I know, they could be all over. They were found in one specific location near hydrothermal vents, way deep in the ocean, thousands and thousands of feet deep. Okay, the Hoatzin. This strange-looking bird is native to Central America. It's also revered by many native cultures there in Central America, especially for its coloration and plumage. It's pretty beautiful. It's got that blue coloration on its skin and those red eyes. It eats plants, which is atypical for most bird species, but it has a specialized stomach that it uses to ferment plant matter, and then it can digest that plant matter. So if you think of something like a cow, they have those multi-chambered stomachs. They're called ruminants because they have to ferment that plant matter before they can digest it. So the Hoatzin is very similar, where it has to ferment that plant matter. And also, due to this special diet of plants and fermentation, people in Central America do not hunt this animal because they say that it tastes awful. It tastes really, really bad. The worst bird you will ever taste. So it's actually still of least concern despite its beauty and common appearances in Central America, because it is just so poor tasting that everyone leaves it alone. There was a video of a scientist or somebody going down to Central America, and he was going hunting with the tribes people, and there was a Hoatzin right at the edge of the village, and he said, well, we're going hunting, why don't we get that bird right there? And he said, it tastes so bad we don't even mess with them. And so you'll see them all over the place because they don't get touched. Yeah.
I have something to add, if I may.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Another interesting thing about this bird, it builds its nests.
Yeah.
And if the nestling is threatened,
Mhm.
it drops into the water, and the nestling can swim underwater until he can get to shore and climb back up into the nest. So it's a defensive way of protecting itself as a nestling.
Very cool. Yeah.
So the bird's really a cool bird.
Absolutely. Yeah, all kinds of interesting facts. Thank you. That's very cool. Yeah, they are pretty big. Yes, they're, probably, maybe a little bit bigger than a chicken, or about the same size, depending if you're thinking about like a current livestock chicken, probably about that size. Okay. All righty. This is a ring-tailed Vontsera. This is one of the cuter additions to our list. It has that iconic ringed tail with that red coloration. So this small mongoose-like animal is native to the island of Madagascar. And if you didn't know, Madagascar is that island off of the coast of Africa, and it is home to hundreds and hundreds of very specialized species, because when it broke off from mainland Africa, it kept a lot of those animals in isolation from the rest of the biomass in Africa. So a lot of these animals have specialized very intensely to give us, things like this ring-tailed Vontsera. This predator feeds off of amphibians, insects, and other animal eggs. It is near threatened, again, due to habitat loss, encroachment from other humans, and it has competition from something called the Indian civet. So there are other predators in its range that compete for resources. So here it is. Very cute. I'd like one as a pet, but I don't think that's going to happen. Pangolins. Have we heard of pangolins before? A couple of us. Yeah, these animals are very, very cute. They are also known as scaly anteaters. They have very similar diets to anteaters. They eat insects, things like termites. They're native to Asia and Africa. There are kind of different species, some that are native to Africa, some that are native to Asia. The Asian species are critically endangered. They are a very common animal to be trafficked. They are used in a lot of traditional medicines in Southeast Asia. And so they are a very sought after animal there in that part of the world. The African species of pangolin are in better shape. They aren't trafficked nearly as much. They're a little more protected. So those species are vulnerable, having slight population decline, but the Asian species are largely critically endangered. So you can see those big scales right there, and those are made of keratin. So the same thing that make up rhino horns, the same thing that make up our hair. So they have those scales all over their body, and if they're threatened by a predator, they just roll up into a ball, and they essentially become a ball covered in bricks. You know, even lions struggle to get through that armor. Okay. This picture kills me. Every time I see it, I gotta laugh. This creature is called a yapok, also known as the water opossum. This creature is actually a marsupial. So most marsupials we know of live in Australia, things like koalas. But this water opossum is native to Central and South America. They actually have a semi-aquatic lifestyle. You can kind of see the webbing in their feet right here. You can see that between his toes. So they live semi-aquatically. So they will swim, they'll be on land and in water looking for different things to eat, little amphibians or bugs, or maybe even little fish. They're doing quite well. They're of least concern. So if you're in Central or South America, you may see one of these little guys running around. They do. They are very hand-like. So that could be, you know, grab a beetle off a log and eat it right up. Yeah. If you've never heard of a wobbegong, I'll be happy to share it with you. These are a very interesting species of shark. So they're a species of carpet shark. So most sharks have to swim consistently to filter fresh water through their gills. So that's how they respirate, is they move fresh water through their gills, and that's how they receive oxygen. But carpet sharks can actually breathe while still. So wobbegongs typically are found near coral reefs. That's where a lot of this coloration comes from. They have that sandy color as well as this darker coloration to blend into the sandy bottoms of coral reefs. And then they have this ornate kind of facial adornment that again allows it to blend into coral, but also acts as a way to bring in fish right next to its mouth. And then it opens its mouth, there's a pressure differential that's caused, and it forces the fish and the water right into its mouth. So it's pretty cool. If you ever see them feed, they'll open their mouth really, really fast in the blink of an eye and almost suction in their prey like a vacuum. These facial protrusions aren't just decorative, they also act as sensory barbs, so they can sense electrical impulses in their environment to know if prey is near them. Their conservation status varies pretty widely. Some are considered fully recovered from a conservation status. Other species of wobbegong are threatened or critically endangered in certain localities and in certain species. But a very beautiful fish. Wobbegong. Okay. Now we have the dwarf crocodile. So this might just look like a baby crocodile, and to some degree it essentially is, but this is the full-grown stature of this species of crocodile. So native to sub-Saharan West Africa, these crocodiles counteract our traditional expectations of what a crocodile looks like. If you imagine the American crocodile or the Nile crocodile, they get really large. You know, the Nile crocodile can get up to 20 feet long, but this dwarf crocodile only reaches adult lengths of a little over 6 feet. So still is, a significant animal, but, a third of what our expectation of a crocodile would be. This species is the smallest of the crocodilians. There are other subspecies of dwarf crocodile that may be a little bit smaller, but still the smallest of its family. They also have this dark black coloration. There are some other species like caiman that have some of this darker coloration, but it's striking to see this really dark hide on this crocodile. They are considered vulnerable, so they are undergoing some population decline, but as of now, that population decline is somewhat steady. They aren't considered to be critically endangered or threatened. Okay. All right. Now we have the tarsier. I thought about putting the eye on here for anybody who has ever seen an eye before. They are so creepy looking. I decided that I gave you enough creepies today. But tarsiers are primate-like creatures. They have really large eyes, as you can see, and then long, skinny fingers. So they use their keen sense of hearing to listen for insects. So they'll get really close to, a hole in a tree, and they can listen for the sounds of insects moving around within the bark. Then they use those really long, skinny fingers to get the insect out from wherever it's hiding. At times, in some species of tarsier, their eyes are actually larger than their brain. So if you're thinking about eye to brain ratio, our eyes are very, very small compared to our brain. But for tarsiers, their eyes sometimes are about the same size. Again, for species of tarsiers, their conservation status varies a little bit. Overall, most tarsiers are considered threatened. They are involved in pet trading, so some people have tarsiers as pets. They're also victims of population loss and habit loss, but some species are doing okay, but most are considered threatened. Okay. Beautiful. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions or if you'd like me to go back through any of the animals, let me know. Yeah, it's almost like bones just wrapped in skin. Yeah. So they do, yeah. So since they are marsupials, they do have pouches, just like koalas. So pretty cool. Atypical to see outside of places like Australia. All righty. Thank you very much, everybody.